Goldman does a sneak play in order to help Tesla, and it turns out to be only moderately successful. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. We want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. So the focus of today's show is the fact that last week Goldman actually came out with an upgrade of Tesla's stock to 775. So on the surface, this looked great. Elon had just made one would say is some very sort of negative comments on Tesla. The stock price had fallen, and the question was kind of what was going to happen from here. And the answer was Goldman kind of rode to the rescue and helped elevate the stock price quite dramatically. And we were thrilled by it, a little bit shocked. I had some of my trading buddies ask what next, and I said to them, well, it's really great that Goldman did this, but usually what happens is you have one well-regarded firm that has good analysts will present their opinion, and then if you don't get support from other analysts that argue that this is valid, it tends to be short-lived in terms of the increasing value of that stock. So in this case, what you may recall happened is that Goldman came out very strong. Jeffries then came forward with somewhat of a tepid affirmative for Tesla. And then we all of a sudden had the final incident where we had a couple of firms like JP Morgan come out and raise from a $70 price target to a $90 price target on the stock, which was in essence a negative promotion. One of the focuses of our show heading into the S&P announcement was kind of looking at market norms and things that big firms tend to do that are sort of clues to each other, and then you kind of sort of learn the game a little bit, if you will. So in this case, what I wanted to concentrate on is the fact that when Goldman came out with this, I sort of was hiding my eyes because I was happy to see the recovery of Tesla's stock price on the upgrade. But over the weekend, I learned that Goldman's actually the firm that issued the $5 billion in shares. So after I saw this, I kind of hit my head. I was like, oh, I understand what happened now. So basically, there's a rule that the SEC has that says there's supposed to be a Chinese wall between investment banking and, let's say, research. And so they're really not supposed to harmonize on anything. They're supposed to be independent entities that make statements, basically. In this case, what ended up happening is that the shares, Goldman got the business to issue the shares. They issued the shares, I want to say, in tandem with an upgrade coming from a Goldman analyst. And there was no other support from other entities sort of pushing that price point. So while we did see somewhat of an updraft, I explained to everybody without at least two analysts supporting, those kind of new numbers, you're really not going to get a heavy push on the stock price as a result. And that's kind of what happened. So the further part of this discussion that comes up is kind of where are we heading into our big numbers on Tesla? The answer that we were expecting was that the stock price would be accelerating nicely already into the 700s, possibly 800s, in anticipation of S&P entry. We really haven't seen those numbers yet because what seems to have taken over as the norm is that there's a process going on where Tesla, for most analysts, is approved into the late 600s, 650, 670, something like that. But when it comes to a decent-sized group of analysts, there's really no push over 700 that's justified by the current fundamentals of the company. So without there being sort of a guaranteed S&P, we're ready to roll crew there, which I expect to start seeing late in the week, it's really hard for the big institutions to go ahead and start pushing the stock because they in fact have to stay within certain parameters of business fundamentals in order to be considered credible. So I'm really stunned to see sort of a very strict maintenance of somewhat justifiable finances that's going on right now, because I really felt like the supply demand challenges related to the S&P would really start kicking in right now, and we have not been seeing that yet. That's kind of a bit of a shock. So the thrust really of this show was just to discuss the fact that you really need multiple analysts in order to get a mega catalyst under a company, and Tesla really hasn't had that yet. And in fact, you could call it had several downgrades, but the stock is still moving north, so that's good. But it looks like we're going to have to wait rather late to get the real push in stock price that we've been hoping to see. So I guess keep your eyes peeled. We look forward to a great outcome as the week closes out. I would also, as we've been discussing, this is a very challenging environment because there are a lot of unanswered questions that even the professionals are going to be surprised by. But, being aware of the fact that the institutions have ways to make money at the expense of smaller investors is sort of one of the norms of the environment we're in and to be expected. So the other thing we wanted to review today is there's a ball of issues happening. First of all, it was discussed that Elon actually has moved from California to Texas, and this gives him better locale to address the construction of the new truck plant along with Boca Chica activities related to SpaceX. I have been fascinated to watch how the news handles Tesla, particularly Elon, and it seems like we're in this cooling period where we've gone from everything being negative, looking for everything negative possible, and we haven't quite gotten there yet. But I was really surprised that the whole story of him moving to Texas was actually a story. And the reason is that there have been several stories over the last couple of years that actually show the flight patterns of his Learjet. And there's basically a very heavy rotation of that plane between a large number of, the plane goes around the world, but in essence, you have a focus of the plane going to Los Angeles, to his home and where the base is for SpaceX. And then there's trips to the Bay Area, and then trips out to the Boca Chica facilities. And that sort of seems to represent about 85% of the plane flights. And then there were Germany and other, global destinations that he took on. This was kind of interesting to me because he kind of lives on the plane, and wherever he's at, he has homes there waiting for him so he can do it. The other note on this is that he actually admitted what his schedule was, and that somewhere just under 50% of his time is spent with Tesla, and then in the 30s on SpaceX, and then there's a 5% that goes to the Boring Company, the Neuralink, and some of the other things he's working on are time allocated fairly specifically. So when, he has all these operations going on that he's overseeing, I guess I'm a little surprised that the whole story of him, moving to Texas is a big deal. The final note on that whole thing is just the fact that he has 7 billion reasons why Texas is a better location, because he gets, I guess, $50 billion if Tesla hits certain milestones. And once those are achieved, if he's a resident of Texas, he's $7 billion to the richer because of taxes he doesn't have to pay the state of California. So I thought this was kind of interesting. The final sort of Elon activity I found fascinating is the whole discussion that he's talking about the fact that having MBAs run large companies all the time, he thinks didn't make a lot of sense. And he's a classic example of that. Now, this has been a very interesting sort of story phenomenon. There's a whole movement in Silicon Valley right now that's suggesting that why don't we take people that are really smart high school graduates and put him through a process to enter business early and skip college. And so there's a debate about, is this a good idea? Does it work? What do you think, etc. But I'm fascinated by this discourse on Elon's part because clearly he has a lot of MBAs that he relies on to help him run the operations of Tesla and SpaceX and all the other businesses he's doing, frankly, as well as on the funding side. I've been sort of fascinated by listening to this conversation because one of the reasons Elon is so successful is that he will actually get quick crash courses in key elements of sort of MBA analysis, in particular, looking at cost of goods sold. I mean, that's accounting. You can't call it an MBA, but it's accounting, which is a part of every MBA. And one of Elon's geniuses has been his focus on the fact that if they can't build an electric vehicle within a certain price point, they won't sell anything. And I will remind you that the only reason Elon became the CEO of Tesla was because of cost control. What he indicated was that the former CEO of the company that they had picked told him they would be delivering a car sub $100,000. And when he was working on the numbers with staff, it was admitted that they were building a $250,000 car. And so Elon found out what was happening behind his back, quickly fired the guy and took over the CEO role. And that's sort of history in terms of his process of being CEO of both SpaceX and Tesla, two very large companies. So I thought this back and forth was really interesting because, you know, if you look at it, in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of really smart entrepreneurs that don't have advanced degrees, particularly in business, and that are very successful. The challenge that is happening, though, is, hey, do you still have good MBA principles of cost containment, cost management, and customer service elements that drive the business? And so it doesn't have to have a title called an MBA on it, but the fundamentals are still the same, and Elon executes them well. That's why they're doing so well. Now, my final, couple of notes there to consider. So even though he may not be an MBA, he might as well be, because it's, do you understand the principles and do you implement them? Both. That's why he's so successful. At any rate, we want to finish up our day with our usual health tips. I related a story regarding research that I was doing on sleep research at Stanford University with Dr. Dement, and I spoke with him about a year ago, year and a half, and we were talking about current research that they're doing. And one of them is they're doing it on narcolepsy in dogs in the old days, but now they've implanted the narcolepsy gene in fish, which I could not believe. So it's a random comment, but just wanted to point out, don't forget establishing for a couple of weeks, going to bed and waking up at around the same time every day, because it gets your body into what's called a circadian rhythm. And that rhythm, well maintained and adjusting your workflow around it, will really give you sort of a better work-life balance and a healthier experience. So highly recommended. And you'll find this at the core of any of the sleep clinics you might go to. Also be mindful of sleep apnea. If you're snoring really loud, that's sleep apnea. You're having brief periods where you're not breathing. So that actually could be bad news and something you want to review with your physician. But taken very seriously, and there's a lot of free or very cheap apps online that you could use to help in this process. Just remember 25 legs per leg, fried foods no more than once a week, and also consider the 5-2 or some other of the fasting diets out there. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Lehitro, Hebrew, Choda Hafez Farsi, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Ni hao ma, hello in Chinese, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk Goldman. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and bye for now.